Remote working, hybrid working, working from home, phrases that just a few years ago felt like a fantasy for many. You talk in your new book, Nature of Work, about workplaces evolving from organisations to organisms. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Once you start to think of your organisation more as a forest than a factory, more as an organism than an organisation, you can start to think about.
But what does the future of work really look like now that flexibility is no longer a perk, but an expectation?
And now what I've spent a lot of time doing is saying it's not the panacea. Just because you can work like that, it doesn't mean that's the only way of working. And really trying to give people excuses.
One person who's been championing this shift long before the rest of us caught on is Paul Miller, author, speaker and founder of the Digital Workplace Group. If you were advising a company that was resistant to flexible working, what would be your strongest argument in favour of it?
Healthier, happier, less sickness, and essentially I would probably say
he's been pushing organisations to embrace the digital revolution years before Zoom calls became part of daily life. Absolutely fascinating, and as you say, wasn't expecting that answer.
No, that's why.
Hello and welcome to The Switch from St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy. I'm Gee Foottit. If you're ready for a better, more fulfilling career, this is your go-to resource to start that journey. Paul, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, G.
Now, are physical offices a thing of the past?
No. I think we got very fixated on digital working, remote working, good thing. But in-person connection will always be important. And whether we call them offices, co-working spaces, etc., they're not a thing of the past. They're a thing of the present and the future.
What's one word you'd use to describe the future of work?
Adaptive.
And what's the most outdated idea about careers that need to disappear fast?
That we can't evolve as the technology evolves.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Can you tell us more about the Digital Workplace Group and why you started it more than 2 decades ago?
Yeah, I was in a meeting with, at that time, SmithKline Beecham, now called GlaxoSmithKline, and I saw this new technology had arrived called HTML. This is in the mid-90s. And I thought it was going to change the way organizations worked and communicated. At that time, I was running a communication consultancy, employee communications. And that got me very interested in the way that HTML and interactive technology would change the way work happened. The other thing that happened a little bit after that was that a couple of clients, consulting clients, said, what do we put on our intranet? And what do other intranets look like? And I said, why don't we form a club and we can go and see other intranets and digital workplaces inside other organizations. So I sort of saw what I call an area of organizational neglect, something that affects the way large organizations work, intranets, digital communications, but it needed kind of looking after and managing.
Really interesting. Now, you recently retired from the Digital Workplace Group and have entered a new work phase. Proof that it's never too late to switch careers. What are you up to now?
Well, I've always liked working. And so one of the things that happened when I left the Digital Workplace Group was that I wanted to kind of get stuck into a few other businesses. So I've been working as a non-exec director for one of the first organisation that I joined the board of is called the Smith Institute, which is a predictive mathematics machine learning company based in Oxford.
Wow.
So I've been kind of navigating the AI technology scene in Oxford. And I've also been doing similar kind of advisory work for a company called Leap, who are involved with digital skills for civil servants. And then the answer you're probably not expecting is that for the last couple of years, I've been working as a stand-up comedian in the world of kind of yoga, meditation, enlightenment. So I'm a sort of novice stand-up comedian performing in the Cotswolds. So I have those two aspects to what I do.
I absolutely love that.
That took you by surprise, didn't it?
It did. What a brilliant surprise. Obviously, this is a career change podcast. So
yeah.
Speaking of either of your career switches, how have you approached a career switch yourself?
Well, if we go back in time, I left my last proper job when I was 25. I was a city editor for Reuters. doing well in my career, but I really didn't like the restrictions of working for somebody. So since then, essentially what I've done is tried to kind of create businesses, shape ideas and commercialize them. So this latest sort of iteration, I realized it was just another refresh of times when I've kind of relaunched Intranets to Digital Workplace. I had a period of time when I was a speechwriter, ghostwriter. I launched a magazine. So it didn't feel that scary to me. It's like meet people, see whether you can add value, work out what your unique selling points are as a founder of a company. And so I sort of see these things as a kind of opportunity to kind of play, experiment, and see whether people like it.
Absolutely. And I love the term in there, how can I add value? How can I serve others? What do they need? And why stand-up comedy?
I'm not quite sure. I was on a meditation retreat, and I've meditated since I was about 18. Went overland to India when I left school, and got very involved in yoga, meditation. And I was on a meditation retreat. It was 2 days before the end of it, 150 people there. And there was an opportunity to basically do a little kind of poem or a song or, 100. So I thought, I'm going to have a go at some stand-up comedy. So I did this 10-minute set on the basis that I'd booked a single bed in a room with two other guys. But when I arrived there, I discovered it wasn't just me. There was my ego, my consciousness, my body, and how the four of us were struggling to kind of get through the week. And I just really enjoyed it. I found it quite creative. So after that, I thought, well, let's kind of give it a go and see if it was a one-off fluke. And so I've been kind of performing in different venues around the Cotswolds and elsewhere. Not something I expected to be doing, but I've now slightly got involved in producing comedy nights, meeting other comedians and...
Fantastic.
Yeah.
This is it. Like a chance moment in a retreat has ended up being a new passion, a new love. Is it teaching you anything about yourself that translate into your work?
Lots. Stand-up comedy is the scariest thing you can do.
I can imagine.
So if I'm getting invited onto a podcast, if I'm getting invited to do a talk, it's not as scary as standing on a stage trying to make people laugh. So it's almost like standing on a cliff edge and jumping off without anything to kind of catch you. They're either laughing or they're not. But it's also taught me about connection, communication, relationship, listening, and things that I think have been really useful. I mean, I've done a lot of public speaking over the time when I was running the Digital Workplace Group to 1,000 people at the IMF, the UN, Adobe, Microsoft. I remember doing a talk to a bunch of people who had invented Outlook at Microsoft. And they were talking to me about synchronous communication, asynchronous. So I've had experience in being in front of a room full of people. And in a way, stand-up comedies are brilliant because you get real-time feedback. You know, in any business, we're always trying to find out what do our customers want. You're trying to listen to the market, listen to them. Well, if you want to find out how to really iterate, you stand in front of a room of 100 people and you try and tell them kind of stories, jokes, form connection. So it's an absolutely brilliant thing.
Absolutely fascinating. And as you say, wasn't expecting that answer.
No, that's why I didn't tell you before the interview. Thought I'd surprise you at the time and see how you react.
So having made career switches reasonably recently yourself, what would you say is the key to a successful career change?
Be bold, but also kind of iterate and listen to the feedback you get. So take a bold step, but don't be naive about it. So getting back to the stand-up comedy, for example, it's bold to do stand-up comedy when you're a novice. On the other hand, you have to listen. Don't bite off more than you can chew. And so I think there's that sort of iteration. I remember when I left working for Reuters, I started speech writing. And I did that having tried to work as a freelance journalist and just realized it's very difficult to make money doing that, whereas speech writing was pretty well paid. So it's take bold steps, but also listen to the market, listen to what people are saying.
One of the things we encourage people exploring our Financial Advisor Academy to do is reach out to their personal network, and that should be some friends and family, but also some ex-colleagues from a few years ago, and just run it by them. I'm thinking of becoming a financial advisor. Can you see me doing that job? Just getting their thoughts and feedback. And it's a little bit of early market research.
It's market research, but it's also business development.
It is.
Because what people are going to say is, actually, if you do that, I might be quite interested because it's something I've been thinking about. When I retired, what I did was I sent out an email to 200 people that I knew in my network, just saying, basically, this is what I've done, this is what's happened with the company, and this is here are my USPs. And probably had about 10 people came back, 2 of which turned into one non-exec role, one advisory role. I'm about to do another one, sort of half-year kind of review, because your network will provide your future clients.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
So that's a fantastic idea.
You've been a vocal advocate for flexible and remote working for years, long before it became mainstream. What does a truly digital workplace look like today?
I think if you take something like EY as an example.
Just for the listeners' benefit, is that Ernst & Young?
Ernst & Young, yes.
Yeah.
Very kind of forward-looking with this. Access to knowledge, to people, to projects, the ability to know where all your colleagues are on a day-to-day basis, the ability to know who's in the office if I'm going to come in that day, who's going to be there. The sense to kind of feel that even though we're working in a far more flexible and fluid way than we did 20 years ago or even 6 years ago pre-pandemic, that you don't feel lonely, isolated. So I would look at an organization like that and the digital workplace there as a kind of example of trying to provide the digital glue inside an organization. Another organization I think of is Disney Studios. During the pandemic, it's like, how do we make films when we can't meet each other? And the answer is they could. But they then discovered a topic that I think has resonated a lot with organizations that I've been working with, which is intentional connection. So that when we're going to come together physically, so we're still using the same technology we use when we're working from home and remotely and so on. How do we form real in-person connection? That's where the stand-up comedy comes in again. It's about, I think there's a danger that digital working can feel quite lonely, quite isolated, particularly for younger people. So I think it's really important that we understand that it's got its real strengths and power to allow us to work productively, but that we really need to connect with each other in a meaningful way, intentional connection, as they talk about it at Disney. And I think that's really important in workplaces. And when people are working digitally, I really emphasize this is not the panacea for work. This is a very, very useful capability that we've got in work, but work should be about us as human beings as well.
And that collaboration in person, as you said, is so important still. And you mentioned different age demographics. I believe that this digital flexible workforce appreciate it at different phases of their lives. So we've got the younger generation who know no different, who've entered the workforce since COVID, for example.
Yeah.
They're used to maybe working from home. Thinking of my niece, she's 18, 19, her first job, I think she has to go into the office twice a week.
Right.
But that's really different to when I first started work.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that young people need that connection with each other.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that she's going in twice a week, because I do hear stories, and you probably do, about people, they join big brand company XYZ, and then they're still in the same room they were in, maybe in a house share, not brilliant situation. It's like, this is my dream. Again, I'm not sure why I'm talking about the IMF so much, but they were quite confused after the pandemic because, they weren't sure whether to get people back into their beautiful central headquarters in Washington. And they couldn't see a productivity reason to do it. And I said, do it just because it's something people enjoy. I said, when all these incredible people from all over the world come and work at the IMF, they do it because they want to be here, meeting each other. So I think it's really important for younger people that they don't feel isolated. And I would really encourage organizations to have some level of structure around in-person working, particularly for people on the younger age, maybe in their 20s. It's different when people get a little bit older and then they've got the kids and they've got and those things.
There's different things to juggle and different priorities.
Yeah, particularly for the younger people. I think they don't want to come into the office 5 days a week, but a bit like your niece, those 2 days will go a long way.
And that's how you learn from people, isn't it? It's just absorbing how they do things, what they say in meetings and things like that. Absolutely. So definitely room for balance. You talk in your new book, Nature of Work, the new story of work for a living age, about workplaces evolving from organisations to organisms. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I think, often we've seen organisations as kind of machines, quite functional, but actually I think they're more like forests than factories. They're more like organisms than organizations. And we start to think about them as a living system. You can look at the health of the system. So often we'll look at financial health. But what about resilience, agility health, relational health? An organization that I always loved working with and for was Adobe. Fantastic brand based in San Jose. And, you look at the kind of they look at the well-being of the organization, the innovation health of the organization. Take somebody like Procter & Gamble. The thing they were concerned about during the pandemic was not that they weren't able to function, but how were they innovating as an organization? And I think that's still a concern. So I think the nature of work is really saying that once you start to think of your organization more as a forest than a factory, more as an organism than an organization, you can start to think about these other aspects of the health of the organization. So in the book, we talk about habitat. And by habitat, it's not about, are you in the office or at home? We want to be in our natural habitat. So let's say there are people inside your organization who've got young families. They want to have some flexibility to be in their habitat at home. They probably do want some time to meet their colleagues. And so you're thinking about people at different phases of their life.
One of the things that we're proud of at St James's Place and our academy is allowing our advisors to work full-time, but decide where and when they work. And this is something I always say we pioneered flexible working when we established back in the 90s with our partnership model. But how can organisations redesign roles for teams and allow a bit more flexibility without sacrificing that collaboration and performance?
Well, I think it's really about focusing. Let's say you're in a marketing team working on a particular brand. Take somebody that we've worked with like Estee Lauder. It's a question of understanding as the leader of that team. What are we trying to do? We're trying to innovate. We're trying to manage the brand. We're trying to introduce new designs and so on, and trying to work out across the team what's the best design structure for our working week. Who have we got in the business? Who's close to Estee Lauder offices? Who's younger? Who's older? And trying to work out a way of working that provides a level of flexibility, but also acknowledge the fact that we're all here working for Estee Lauder. We've got a job to do, and there are going to be certain requirements. So, for example, if I'm one of the older people in the company and I want to come into the office because I want to actually meet people, I want other colleagues to be there. So can we agree a few days a month when we're actually going to be here physically together? And I suggest not going as far as Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase, another organization I know well, where it's like, I want you back in the office 5 days a week, but it's not a free for all. And I would suggest a bit more structure around it. There was a CEO I was advising, and this individual was coming to the office several times during the month. And I said to him, why don't you tell people for the rest of the year which days you're going to be in the office? And he said, why would I do that? And I said, because it will show, people will then think, okay, so and he's going to be in the office. Maybe I'll shape my in-person time. And some other people in the leadership team will maybe try to do it. So you're influencing behavior in a kind of gentle way.
Absolutely. I love that. Now, we've touched upon this earlier, but I recently saw a remote working team leader on LinkedIn explaining how they have a daily stand-up meeting to emulate what it might be like chatting at the water cooler, you know, that old saying. They also have an annual get-together where they go on a big team building trip. Have you got any tips on how to make remote setup better and healthier for everybody?
Well, I love this type of idea. It's a structure. It's a way of introducing some regularity, some sense of community into the virtual meetings. Something that DWG did, the company that I retired from, was coffee roulette. You'd meet up with a different colleague once every couple of weeks just to chat about what's going on in your life. So I like those deliberate, intentional ways of saying, look, it is digital, it is virtual, but it's not some kind of soup that we just sort of swim around in. You know, we're actually introducing some thought into it. So telling people why we're doing it, it's also saying that the leader of that meeting or the person running that meeting is actually thinking about you. Having times where you connect with each other that are not just about work. So I think trying to introduce structure like that's a really good thing.
Tell me more about coffee roulette. How did that work?
It was just something everybody in the company into a kind of hopper. I'm going to meet Gee a week on Tuesday. Gee's in financial management. I'm in HR. And we just have half an hour on the phone finding out about each other. You know, where do you live? What do you get up to? And so on. I mean, something else that DWG did that worked very well was every 6 weeks, there was what's called quiet weeks, where we were going to turn down the email traffic, turn down the meeting traffic. You're still meeting customer client needs, but it's a chance to be a little bit more reflective, to know that you're going to be able to focus on one or two things that you weren't able to. So I think, just like we've looked at lots of desk and office configurations in the physical workplace, start to see this digital workplace as a kind of digital headquarters that allows everybody inside your organization to come in. I mean, if you've got an organization like IKEA with hundreds of thousands of people working for the company, they can't all come to the headquarters in Sweden, but they can come to the digital headquarters.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to see some of the freedoms and flexibilities and capabilities that the digital workplace has and start to use those.
And how important are those quiet times? Because I do feel with the digital age, we are always available, we're always on, whether it be, you know, your work emails or actually just distractions from social media. So how important are those quiet times for people if their organisations aren't creating that space for them, or if they have their own business? What would you suggest?
I think it's something you can experiment with. I mean, you don't have to call it quiet time. You could come up with a term that works for your organisation a little bit better. But I think they're really important because you're saying that you're thinking about the health and well-being and productivity. I mean, if you're in an organisation and you've just got back-to-back meetings virtually, it's really draining. I went away on holiday with some friends, and one of the people who's a lawyer was working, and I was kind of listening to her work, and it's really tough. It's intense, all the clauses. And one meeting after another. That was quite an unusual day for her. But she was really exhausted by the end of it. And I think organizations, it's like they think we're machines. We can just keep kind of pressing play again and again, but we're not. So I think just kind of thinking in a more adaptive way is a really good thing.
Absolutely. And what about self-employed people just starting out? They may not have an organisation to dictate any of these things, or no office or colleagues to go and visit. And they find themselves working more remotely these days. It's more cost effective for one. So what advice would you give to them?
I think co-working spaces are really good. I think looking to create coffee opportunities. I mean, one of the things I've been doing, because effectively I've been self-employed since I retired from the company. So I'm into self-employed working. I've been meeting a lot of people for coffee in Oxford, or going to Oxford colleges for drinks and canapes with professors and venture capitalists and things like this. So I would say really try and build in opportunities to physically connect. I mean, it's quite ironic. Before the pandemic, I spent my time going round and talking at quite a lot of organizations saying, guys, you can work a lot more flexibly than this. The digital workplace brings freedom. And they were like, oh, I don't know if we can do that. And then the pandemic arrives and they flip a switch and go, this is actually fine. And now what I've spent a lot of time doing is saying it's not the panacea. Just because you can work like that, it doesn't mean that's the only way of working. And really trying to give people excuses. So if you're self-employed, do give yourself the time to have in-person connection. So co-working, coffees, but maybe you can find a client and say, look, would you mind if I come into your office once every week, once every couple of weeks? Because I'd really like just the experience of being there, meet a few of you. They're not going to go, why would you do that? It's just annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. People like to be asked for help and to be able to provide help, don't they?
Mm.
Nearly a third of workers who have requested flexible working say their request was refused because of employer fears about their productivity. That's according to research from Phoenix Group. Are workers less productive if they're given more flexibility?
Well, no, because Microsoft has probably got the most extensive studies, tens of thousands of people that they research. People, if anything, are more productive. You're removing the time of travel. You can flex your work. So all the kind of research says you're not going to get a loss of productivity. In fact, there was a book I remember reading called Reworked, quite a pioneering book, probably about 15 years ago, run by probably an agency based in Chicago. And actually the problem was they said, why are offices so unproductive? But I think understanding that there are fears around this, but it's not a loss of productivity. And I think it's really telling people, if you've got an issue where somebody's saying, we really are nervous about this, say, look, well, can we experiment? Can I try it for the next quarter? Let's design something that maybe doesn't exactly meet my requirements or exactly meet your requirements, and let's see how we get on. And so you're really not trying to kind of change the world in one day. You're trying to evolve.
If you were advising a company that was resistant to flexible working, what would be your strongest argument in favour of it?
Healthier, happier, less sickness. And essentially, I would probably say you don't want to be like King Canute standing in front of the water. I mean, hybrid remote working is here for the long haul. I think there's a level at which work is coming back to being in person as well, but that we're always going to have this flexibility. And so it would really be around, you're paying people what you're paying them. You want them to be as productive, as happy as well as possible. And this will enhance that.
Some people feel flexible working is only for certain industries. Is that true?
I think it is. I think it is true. I mean, if you think of a hospital, there's a whole bunch of people in a hospital who have to come into that hospital to do the work. There are also people who don't need to do that. And in a way, you want as few human bodies in a hospital at one time as possible. So I think you can adapt. it is more suited to knowledge-based businesses, service-based businesses. One thing I would say is that if you take people working in retail, if they're working in the co-op, we need to have the staff there. They can't work remotely. However, what you can do is offer people more flexibility around their shift patterns. Marks and Spencer's have this app that allows people, if you're doing a particular role in Marks and Spencer's, to pick up shifts in different Marks and Spencer's stores. So you're giving people some flexibility. I think what people are looking for in work is more freedom.
What is a common misconception about remote or hybrid working that you wish could be debunked for good?
I think that it's the answer to everything, that we've now found the Holy Grail. Everybody can work from wherever they want, whenever they want. That doesn't work because I think it doesn't provide the glue that comes.
And actually, you could argue that remote working helps boost those moments of in-person connection when they do happen and make them more appreciated.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the quotes that I used to use, just reminding myself when I was doing quite a lot of these talks, was Timothy Leary, quite famous in the 60s, Harvard professor, wrote Tune In, Turn On, Drop Out, a bit of an ex-hippie. And he died in the 90s, and he actually broadcast his passing on the internet. Very unusual, very maverick guy. But he said, in the future, physical meetings will become sacred and take on mythical importance. So treat the times when you're physically together as something special. Picking up on this Disney idea of intentional connection. Don't see it as transactional. And when people are there, make sure that they're not just sitting at their desks in the same way, as isolated as they could be on a normal day. Look, engineer some social collaboration, some time together.
I love that. Now, your current work sees you in the field of AI and automation. Do you see that intersecting with flexible working?
Yeah, I think it's got the capability. It's another technology evolution. I think we're all debating the extent to which it's going to impact us. But I've seen enough technology innovations. I mean, I started work pre-internet, pre-computers. So I've seen different waves of innovation. And I think AI, generative AI, machine learning is obviously hugely significant. But I think it can provide enhancements to the way we work, easier to connect with each other, easier to understand knowledge, the ability to kind of record salient points from a meeting and so on. So I think let's see where it can enhance the principles of a good, healthy workplace.
Absolutely. It's exciting times. And what about virtual reality meetings?
It's still not quite there. It's sort of a bit like driverless cars. It's sort of there. I mean, the big innovation, what was the big innovation when Teams came along? Actually, it was the quality of their audio. The thing that the Teams division at Microsoft really focused on was not the ability to see each other, important though that is. It was the ability to hear each other, because that's the key to us being able to work together. I mean, if all you and I could do now is see each other, but we couldn't hear each other, we're not going to have much of a conversation. But if we couldn't see each other, we could still have a conversation. So I'm skeptical as to where virtual 3D renditions are going to come. I've seen different waves of its Second Life, and I sort of wait to be convinced.
Yeah, interesting. I've had only a couple of experiences using really high quality VR headsets. One of them was made me feel like I was on top of a building and had to step, and I actually couldn't move my feet. And then another one was one of these like metaverse meetings. So i.e. there's a colleague in the US that I'm near, and it feels like we're supposed to feel like we're sitting like this. And I think you're right. It didn't feel authentic yet. That wasn't quite there.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a meeting the other day that had really excellent camera that would rotate, pick up the person speaking, excellent rendition of the people who were virtual, excellent audio. Those are the things that matter fundamentally. Do I really need to have a holograph version? Question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you mentioned EY. What are your thoughts on the recent news that the Big Four have slashed graduate jobs as AI is taking on some of the entry-level work? And is this part of an ongoing trend that you're seeing in other companies too? And what does that mean for younger people entering?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions around the impact of AI and the extent to which organizations will need as many people. So I think we're in an experimentation phase. And I think the reduction of hiring graduates is an experiment. If we have a couple of years where we reduce the headcount coming in because everybody kind of grew too fast during COVID, so there've been waves of redundancy. Let's see how we get on. I don't think it's there necessarily as a permanent thing. I think the investment into AI has been absolutely astronomical. Is it really producing a return as big as that? Where's the innovation that an Accenture, an EY, whoever needs to bring? And I would be nervous if they're not committing to, we're not going to hire that number of graduates full stop. I think they're in an experimentation phase.
So do you think it's wrong to see digital transformation as purely an AI-driven stage?
Yeah, because I think digital transformation is part of work. Organization produce services and products in order to meet customer demand. Digital is not the only thing that produces that. I think it's very interesting when you go into different, I live in the Cotswolds, lots of different pubs there. There's a whole pub economy around the Cotswolds. Some places close down, other places open up. Why do some places succeed? They're doing it on the surface, they're producing it all the same things. So I think there are different requirements. Why do some people become customers of St. James's and other people go to other organizations? It's not probably just the products, it's the people, it's the relationship. Have confidence that those things matter.
Now, for somebody switching careers, perhaps retraining or maybe returning to the workforce after having children, perhaps, what practical tips do you have to make flexibility part of their negotiation?
Well, tell people what you can do, not what you can't do. You know, I've had experience. Digital Workplace Group often would hire people who'd been in corporate roles, gone off to have kids and wanted to then come back with more flexibility, and actually tell them about what the organization's going to get, why you can do a really great job in that organization. But also you've got a lot of bargaining power right at the beginning, which is, I would like to have a certain level of flexibility. They're either going to say that's normal and standard here, or this is what I'm asking for. So I always feel like right at the beginning of starting a new role, you've got a lot of influence, you've got a lot of clout. So make sure you get your asks in there, but tell them what's in it for them.
Absolutely. I love that. And looking back at your career and your switches, which one are you most grateful that you took?
Leaving my full-time job when I was 25. So give up working as a city editor at Reuters. And I remember the next day after I'd left, I was sitting in a cafe in Notting Hill writing a speech for somebody who I'd kind of been in contact with, senior executive. And I was waiting for somebody to sort of tap me on the shoulder and tell me to get back to work. So I left because I wanted freedom, the freedom to do what I wanted. And I think that was the key thing. I think it's one of the reasons why retirement for me is not really a term that has a great deal of meaning, because I think when people retire, what they really want is freedom. And I think if you can get that in your work, get it as early as possible.
And finally, we ask this to all of our guests. What is the best piece of invaluable advice that you've been given from somebody else that you would like to pass on?
I got a piece of advice when I had been working freelance, having left Reuters in the 80s. And I applied, I got a bit sort of nervous about the fragility of the whole thing. And so I applied to the Times and I got offered a job as their banking correspondent. And when I was wondering whether to sort of go back in and get a job again, somebody said, what do you want to do on a wet Wednesday in November? So when you're not at a party saying, hey guys, I'm the banking correspondent at the Times, how amazing is that? When it's a wet Wednesday in November and you've got to trek into the Times offices, is that what you want to do? And I realised, no, when nobody's looking, that's not what I want to do. So what do you want to do on a wet Wednesday in November?
Brilliant. I absolutely love that. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. If people want to find you, how can they get in touch?
Paul Howard Miller at hotmail.com or Paul Howard Miller or Paul Miller on LinkedIn. That's a good place. If you put in Paul Miller, there's a lot of Paul Millers, and DWG or Digital Workplace Group. Be delighted to connect.
Fantastic. Thank you. A big thanks to Paul for joining us on the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode of The Switch, make sure to follow, rate and share it with somebody who's ready for a career change. And if you're on your own journey, hit subscribe. We've got plenty more inspiration and insight coming your way. I'm Gee Foottit and you've been listening to The Switch from St James's Place Financial Advisor Academy.